Hello and welcome back to our coverage of section 10.1. We're looking at the second day where we create the right graph for a given data set. For example, use the following data to make a graph. When we look at this graph, we want the graph to be good for displaying categories. If it made up a whole of everything, we could look at a circle graph, and actually in this case, the circle graph would work as well, but we're going to go with a bar graph here. Choose an appropriate scale and interval. The scale must include all of the data values. So we would look at values from 0 to 8, and we've got our roses, lilies, and that bottom one there, agapanthus, and peonies. Next step is to use the data to determine the lengths of the bars. We draw the bars of equal width, and the bars shouldn't be touching. So when we take our values, roses was at 3, the lilies was at 4, agapanthus at 6, and also the peonies. We want to now title the graph and label the horizontal and vertical axes. So horizontally we add the type of flower, vertically it's the number of flowers, and the name we could give this graph is the flowers in an arrangement. This next one, we're going to use a graph that's good for looking at the whole when all information is given, and in this case it's a circle graph, and it's fairly involved, so I'm going to ask you to pay attention and hit pause when you need to. Our first step will be to calculate the percent of total represented by each category. Well, first we need to know what is the total, and in this case you would add up these values and you would get 61 total. To find the percents, we take each of the components and divide by 61, and we come up with these values. Now, you should feel comfortable calculating these on your own, even if you are looking, following along and seeing the answers. Our next step is to find the angle measure, or convert these percents into a sector angle. Since there are 360 degrees in a circle, we multiply the percent by 360. Similarly then, we're going to take these as decimals and find each of their angles. We're going to draw a circle, mark the center, and create each sector using a straight edge to draw a radius, and title the graph. When you take a look then from our circle, we have each of the quantities represented, not as a percent or an angle, but the quantities for each of the degrees. Okay. Use this given data to make a graph and explain why you chose it. Well, in looking at this, this is a data set based on time, and what we learned yesterday was that the line graph is a good graph for anything that changes over time. So we determine the scale and interval for each set of data. Time should be plotted on the horizontal axis because it's the independent. That's what I have here. Plot a point for each pair of values and connect the points using line segments. So we would put at 1880, we'd put some number near 265. We don't know exactly where that would be. In 1920 at 248. 1960, 124. And then in 2000, way down to 53. You'd get a straight edge. I'll just take my software here and make straight lines. And there you go. We're going to title it County Farms. And you can see the number of farms has been dropping somewhat dramatically since 1920. Finally, here's an example. If you don't have a space for circle, try to find a way to create a circle graph. I'm going to give you all the data and then we'll just look at what it looks like in the finished result. This is a lot of work, but you should see it and it should make some sense to you. If we take, to find the percents, we would add up all these values and find there's 120, then take each of the components and turn them into a percent. If we were to add up each of these percents, we would get to 100%, not including the rounding errors. And these as degrees would just be multiplying the percent as a decimal times 360. And if we were to add up all of these as degrees, we should get 360 degrees. And visually, what I guess I'd ask you to do is go ahead and fill in the spaces there for the circle graph. And the nice thing about this is this gives 100% of Vera's time. Her time is 100% accounted for, whether it's sleeping, homework, sports, school, eating, or other things. And it's nice to have that kind of comparison through this graph. Your quiz then is going to be to create a bar graph and ask you to make sure you remember this is going to be a horizontal one, but remember to keep the bars separate. All right, thanks, and we'll see you in class.